My name is Dr. Alexander Hartwell. I'm a neurosurgeon, or I was. I pioneered a revolutionary technique for treating brain tumors that's now taught in medical schools worldwide. I was worth $89 million. I had a wife I loved, 2 kids I adored, a career that saved lives. Then my twin brother Ethan pushed me off a yacht, left me for dead, got plastic surgery to make his face match mine exactly, and spent the next 14 years living as me. He slept with my wife, raised my children, performed surgeries using my name, spent my money, lived in my house, wore my clothes, answered to my name. Everyone, and I mean everyone, thought he was me. My wife couldn't tell the difference. My kids called him Dad. My colleagues at the hospital worked alongside him for 14 years and never suspected. Meanwhile, I was homeless, disfigured from the fall and nearly drowning, brain damaged enough that I couldn't remember who I was for 3 years, living on the streets of the same city where I was performing brain surgery and coming home to my family every night. I watched my own life from a distance, knowing something was wrong but unable to prove it, unable to even remember my own name. Until the memories came back, and then I spent 11 years planning the most elaborate confrontation in human history. Because here's the thing, you can't just walk up to someone living your life and say, "Hey, I'm the real one." They'll think you're insane, they'll call the police, they'll have you institutionalized. No, I had to prove I was me. I had to document every difference between us, every mistake he made, every moment where he wasn't quite right. And then I had to wait for him to make the one fatal error that would destroy him. That error came when he decided to fake my death, his death, to collect a $50 million life insurance policy. I attended my own funeral, sat in the back row, watched my wife cry over a casket containing someone else's body while my brother, wearing my face, comforted her. And then, just as they were about to close the casket, I stood up and said 5 words that changed everything. "That's not me, I'm me." What happened next destroyed a family, revealed a conspiracy, and proved that the person you trust most in the world might literally be trying to replace you. This is that story, and I'm warning you right now, after you hear this, you're going to look at every person in your life differently. I need to take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand what made us different enough that one of us wanted to become the other. Ethan and I were identical twins, I mean identical, same height, same weight, same face, same voice when we were kids. Our own mother mixed us up sometimes. But that's where the similarities ended. I was the successful one. I don't say that to brag, it's just fact. I excelled in school, got into Harvard Medical School, became a neurosurgeon by 30, pioneered a technique that revolutionized how we treat inoperable brain tumors. By 35, I was chief of neurosurgery at one of the best hospitals in the country, making $2 million a year in salary alone, plus another $5.10 million annually from patents, speaking fees, and consulting. I was married to Jessica, my college sweetheart, beautiful, brilliant, a corporate attorney who made $500K a year herself. We had 2 kids, Sophia, 7, and Lucas, 5. We lived in a $6 million house in Pacific Heights. We had everything. Ethan had nothing. He'd gone to medical school too, same year, different school, but he'd washed out after 2 years. The pressure, the studying, the constant competition, he couldn't handle it. He dropped out, went to work as a pharmaceutical sales rep, made decent money but nothing like what I was making. He never married, never had kids, lived in a small apartment in Oakland, drove a 10-year-old Honda while I drove a Tesla. And he hated me for it. I didn't realize how much he hated me until the yacht party. It was my 36th birthday. Jessica had organized this elaborate surprise party on a yacht in San Francisco Bay. 200 guests, colleagues, friends, family. Ethan was there, of course. He was my twin brother, my best man at my wedding, uncle to my kids. The party was perfect. Beautiful sunset, champagne flowing, everyone celebrating my success. I gave a speech thanking everyone, mentioning how grateful I was for the life I'd built, the family I had, the career that let me help people. I saw something in Ethan's eyes during that speech, something dark, but I was tipsy and happy, and I dismissed it. Later, around 11 p.m., when most guests had left, Ethan found me on the aft deck. I was alone, looking at the city lights, thinking about how lucky I was. "Hey," he said, walking up beside me, "hell of a party." Jessica outdid herself. I can't believe she pulled this together without me knowing. "You've got a good life, Alex. Beautiful wife, amazing kids, career most doctors would kill for." "I've been lucky." Lucky, he repeated, something bitter in his tone. Is that what you think it is, luck? I turned to look at him. What's wrong? What's wrong? He laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. What's wrong is that we're identical, Alex. Same DNA, same face, same start in life. But you got everything and I got nothing. Ethan, you didn't get nothing. You have a good job, you. I have a sales job. I'm a dropout who makes $80K a year while my identical twin is a neurosurgeon worth $90 million. Do you know what that feels like? To see your exact genetic copy living the life you should have had. Should have had, Ethan, you made different choices. Did I, or did you just get lucky? The right professor who liked you, the right opportunity at the right time, the right girl who fell in love with you instead of me. What if I'd been the one who went to Harvard? What if I'd met Jessica first? Maybe our lives would be reversed. He was getting agitated, moving closer to me. The yacht was quiet now, just crew below deck, everyone else gone. Ethan, you're drunk, let's go inside. I'm not drunk, I'm clear for the first time in my life, because I just realized something, Alex. We're identical, which means there's no reason you should be living your life instead of me. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that if you didn't exist, I could be you. I could have your life, your wife, your kids, your money, everything, because we have the same face. My heart started pounding. Ethan, you're scaring me. This isn't funny. It's not supposed to be funny. It's supposed to be justice. He moved fast. I didn't even see his hands coming up until they hit my chest, shoving me backward toward the railing. I stumbled, my back hitting the metal barrier. ETHAN, what are you doing? What I should have done years ago, taking back the life that was supposed to be mine. He shoved me again, harder this time. My center of gravity went backward. I grabbed for the railing, but my hands were slick with champagne and sweat. I went over. The fall felt like it lasted forever. The water was freezing when I hit. The impact knocked the air from my lungs. I went under, disoriented, the yacht's lights disappearing above me. I fought to the surface, gasping, "Help, ETHAN, help." I saw him at the railing, looking down at me, just watching. Ethan, please, I can't swim, the current. I know, he said calmly, that's the point. He turned and walked away from the railing. And I was alone in the dark water, the current pulling me away from the yacht, toward the Golden Gate Bridge and the open ocean beyond. The next thing I remember is waking up on rocks. I don't know how long I was in the water, hours maybe. The current had swept me under the Golden Gate and deposited me on the rocky shore near Fort Point. I was hypothermic, barely conscious, my head bleeding from where I'd hit something during the fall. I crawled up the rocks, collapsed in some bushes, and passed out. When I woke up again, it was daylight. There were people around, joggers, tourists. I tried to call for help, but my voice wouldn't work. My head felt like it was splitting open. My vision was blurry. Eventually, a jogger found me, called 911. Paramedics came. "What's your name?" they asked. I opened my mouth to say Alexander Hartwell, but nothing came out. My brain knew the words but couldn't access them. It was like trying to remember a dream after waking up. I knew there was something there, but I couldn't grasp it. "Can you tell us what happened?" I couldn't, the memories were fragments. A yacht, someone pushing me, water, cold, pain, but I couldn't connect them into a coherent narrative. They took me to San Francisco General. I had a severe concussion, hypothermia, and traumatic brain injury that affected my memory and speech. They couldn't identify me. I had no wallet, no phone, no ID, and I couldn't tell them who I was. I became John Doe 4738, homeless man, found near Fort Point, probable suicide attempt or accident, severe TBI affecting cognitive function. They kept me for 3 days, then transferred me to a county mental health facility because I was clearly not capable of caring for myself and had no family to claim me. I spent 6 months there, slowly recovering language and motor skills, but my memories remained fragmentary. I knew I had a name, I knew I had a life somewhere, but I couldn't remember details. The staff tried to help. They showed me photos of missing persons, thinking maybe I'd recognize myself, but none of the faces meant anything to me. Eventually, they discharged me to a homeless shelter. I was functional enough to survive, but not functional enough to work or remember my identity. I lived on the streets of San Francisco for 3 years, sleeping in doorways, eating at soup kitchens, occasionally doing day labor for cash when I could manage it. And during those 3 years, somewhere in the city, Ethan was living my life. The memories started coming back when I was about 3.5 years after the fall. It started with dreams, flashes of a life I couldn't quite remember, a woman with dark hair, 2 children laughing, an operating room, hands performing delicate surgery on exposed brain tissue. I would wake up from these dreams with tears on my face, knowing they meant something but unable to grasp what. Then one day I was walking past a bus stop and saw an advertisement, a hospital ad promoting their neurosurgery department. The photo showed a doctor in scrubs, handsome and confident. I stopped dead because I knew that face. Not because it was familiar, because it was mine. I stood there staring at that photo for probably 20 minutes, people flowing around me like I was a rock in a stream. That was my face, I was certain of it, but the name on the ad said Dr. Alexander Hartwell, Chief of Neurosurgery. Dr. Alexander Hartwell, the name hit me like a physical blow. That was me, I was Alexander Hartwell. But if I was Alexander Hartwell, who was the man in that photo? The memories started flooding back then, not all at once, it took months, but gradually, piece by piece. My name, my wife, my children, my career, the yacht, my brother being pushed, the water, the cold. Ethan. Ethan had pushed me off the yacht. Ethan had left me to die, and somehow, Ethan was now living as me. But how? We were identical, yes, but Jessica would know. She was married to me for 12 years. She'd know the difference between me and my twin brother. Wouldn't she? I started watching, following Alexander Hartwell from a distance. I saw him leave the hospital in a Tesla, my Tesla, drive to a house in Pacific Heights, my house. I saw Jessica greet him at the door with a kiss, saw 2 children run to hug him. My children, my wife, my life. And he was living it like it was his. I watched for weeks trying to understand, how was this possible? How could Ethan fool everyone? Then I saw him up close one day, and I understood. He'd had plastic surgery. Our faces had been identical before, but 14 years creates small differences. The way your face moves creates lines. Expressions form patterns. Injuries leave scars. Ethan and I had started to look slightly different by our mid-30s, not enough that strangers would notice, but enough that Jessica would have noticed. But now his face matched mine exactly. The small scar I had on my left eyebrow from a childhood fall, the slightly crooked tooth from a hockey accident, even the pattern of lines around my eyes. He'd had a surgeon reconstruct his face to match mine perfectly, probably showed them my photos, said he wanted to look like his twin brother, played it off as vanity or some twin bonding thing. And then he'd stepped into my life, and no one had questioned it. Because I was dead, the yacht captain had reported that I'd fallen overboard during my birthday party. Search and rescue had looked for me. They'd found nothing. After 48 hours, I was presumed dead. My body was never found, but that's not uncommon with the strong currents under the Golden Gate Bridge. People drown there, and the ocean doesn't give them back. There had been a memorial service. My death certificate had been filed. Ethan, as me, had grieved publicly, been comforted by my wife, held my children while they cried. And then he just continued being me, went back to work at the hospital, came home to my family every night, lived my life. For 3 years I watched from the streets, homeless, brain-damaged, unable to prove who I was. Then I spent the next 11 years planning my return. The first step was recovering fully. I needed my brain to work at the level it once had. I started with the basics. I did cognitive exercises constantly, memory games, math problems, anything that would rebuild the neural pathways that had been damaged. I read medical journals I found in library trash cans, testing whether I could still understand complex neurosurgery. Slowly my mind came back, not completely. I would never be quite the surgeon I was before, but enough to think clearly, to plan, to strategize. The second step was evidence. I couldn't just show up and claim to be Alexander Hartwell. Ethan had been living as me for years. He had my life, my credentials, my relationships. Everyone would believe him over a homeless man claiming to be the real Alexander. I needed proof that I was me, and he wasn't. I started documenting everything, every small difference between us, every mistake he made that the real Alexander Hartwell wouldn't have made. I stalked his life obsessively. I learned his routines. I watched him interact with MY family, MY colleagues, MY friends, and I cataloged every discrepancy. He didn't know that I had a nut allergy, I saw him eat cashews at a hospital fundraiser. The real Alexander Hartwell would have known that would send him to the ER. He didn't remember the name of Jessica's childhood dog. I heard him get it wrong during a conversation at a barbecue. I knew it was Patches, a golden retriever she'd loved since age 8. He didn't know that Lucas, my son, had a birthmark on his left shoulder blade shaped like Texas. I saw him ask Jessica about it when helping the kid change for swimming. A real father would have known. Small things, dozens of them, hundreds over the years. I also discovered something crucial. Ethan had never actually finished medical school, which meant he wasn't qualified to perform surgery. But Alexander Hartwell was chief of neurosurgery, performing complex brain operations multiple times a week. I started requesting medical records, not easy when you're homeless and have no ID, but possible through medical advocacy organizations. I studied the surgical outcomes of Dr. Alexander Hartwell over the past 14 years. They were worse than mine had been, not catastrophically worse. Ethan was smart enough to have studied extensively, and he had the benefit of the techniques I'd pioneered before I died, but the mortality rates were slightly higher. The complication rates were elevated. The surgical precision wasn't quite there. People were dying because my brother was performing brain surgery without actually being qualified to do it. But I still couldn't just reveal myself, because even with all this evidence, it would be my word against his, and he was the respected neurosurgeon with a 14-year track record. I was the homeless John Doe with traumatic brain injury and no identification. I needed something bigger, something undeniable. That's when I learned about the life insurance policy. I found out by accident. I was digging through trash behind my house, where I used to live, and found a shredded letter from an insurance company. I pieced it together in an alley, my hands shaking as I read it. It was a notice about a $50 million life insurance policy on Dr. Alexander Hartwell, the policy I had taken out years ago to protect Jessica and the kids if anything happened to me. Ethan had been making payments on it for 14 years, keeping it active. Why would he do that? He was me now. He didn't need life insurance on himself. Unless he was planning to die. Or rather, planning to make it look like Alexander Hartwell had died so he could collect the $50 million, assume a new identity, and disappear with my money and possibly my wife. I started watching more carefully, looking for signs that he was planning something. And I found them. He had started making mistakes at the hospital, deliberate ones, I realized, creating a narrative of a surgeon under stress, burning out, possibly depressed. He'd had several arguments with colleagues that were out of character. He'd been seen drinking heavily at hospital events. He was building a profile of someone who might commit suicide. I realized what he was planning. He was going to fake Alexander Hartwell's death, make it look like suicide or accident, collect the $50 million insurance payout, and then either continue living as me, claiming to have survived whatever the accident was, or disappear entirely with a new identity. Either way, he'd get the money, and I'd still be erased. That's when I knew I had to make my move at his funeral, at MY Funeral. I had to wait for him to go through with faking his death, let him think he'd succeeded, and then reveal myself at the moment of maximum impact. So I waited and watched and prepared. The accident happened on a Friday evening, 6 months after I discovered his plan. According to news reports, Dr. Alexander Hartwell had been driving on Highway 1, the coastal road south of San Francisco. His car had gone off a cliff in an area with no guardrails. The vehicle had exploded on impact with the rocks below. The body inside was burned beyond recognition, but identified through dental records, which Ethan must have somehow falsified or switched. The news coverage was extensive. Prominent neurosurgeon, beloved husband and father, tragic accident, devastating loss to the medical community. I watched it all from a library computer, tears streaming down my face, because even though it was fake, even though I knew Ethan was still alive somewhere planning his escape, this was my life they were mourning, my wife genuinely crying, my kids truly devastated. The funeral was scheduled for the following Saturday. It would be huge, hundreds of colleagues, friends, patients whose lives I had saved. I spent that week preparing. I got a haircut at a shelter that offered services to homeless people. I found a suit at Goodwill, not expensive, but clean and presentable. I practiced what I would say, how I would reveal myself. And I gathered every piece of evidence I'd collected over 14 years. Photographs of Ethan making mistakes the real Alexander wouldn't make, medical records showing the decline in surgical outcomes, documented instances of him not knowing things about my family that I would have known. I also had one more thing, my own body. I had scars from the fall that Ethan didn't have, a distinctive birthmark on my left ribcage that Ethan had never had, and DNA. I'd managed to save samples of my hair, my blood from a cut, things that could be tested against whatever DNA records existed from before my death. I arrived at the funeral early and sat in the back row. I watched people file in, hundreds of them, all here to mourn me. Jessica was in the front row, wearing black, holding Sophia and Lucas. They were teenagers now. Sophia was 21, Lucas was 19. I'd missed their entire adolescence. I saw colleagues from the hospital, my parents, who thought they'd lost me 14 years ago, friends I'd known for decades. And then I saw Ethan. He walked in wearing a dark suit, looking devastated, playing the role of the grieving. What, brother? But everyone thought he was me, so who was he supposed to be? Then I realized he'd created a whole new identity for himself. He must have documents claiming he was someone else, probably his real name, Ethan, but with a fake backstory, maybe claiming to be a distant relative or family friend. He sat with the family section, comforting Jessica, putting his hand on Lucas's shoulder. The rage I felt in that moment was indescribable. The service began. Person after person got up to speak about Alexander Hartwell, about what a brilliant surgeon he was, what a devoted father, what a loss his death represented. I listened to them eulogize a man who was sitting 30 feet away from his own funeral. Finally, they called for anyone else who wanted to speak. This was my moment. I stood up. People turned to look at me, this homeless-looking man in an ill-fitting suit, standing in the back row. I walked down the aisle, slowly, every eye on me. Jessica looked confused. Sophia leaned over to whisper something to her mother. Lucas was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. I reached the front of the room and turned to face the congregation. I know you're all here to mourn Alexander Hartwell, I said, my voice stronger than I'd expected, but I need to tell you something. Alexander Hartwell isn't dead. Murmuring confusion, someone said, "Sir, this isn't appropriate." I know it's not appropriate. Nothing about this situation is appropriate, but it needs to be said. I took a breath. Alexander Hartwell isn't dead because I'm Alexander Hartwell. I'm standing right here. The murmuring became gasps. Jessica was staring at me with horror. Sophia had her hand over her mouth. 14 years ago, my twin brother Ethan pushed me off a yacht during my birthday party. He left me to die in San Francisco Bay. I survived, but I had severe brain trauma that destroyed my memory. For 3 years, I couldn't remember my own name. I lived on the streets while Ethan had plastic surgery to match my face exactly, and then stepped into my life. I pointed at Ethan, who had gone completely white. That man sitting right there is not a mourner. He's not a friend or distant relative. He's Ethan Hartwell, my identical twin brother, who has been living as me for 14 years. He married my wife. He raised my children as his own. He performed brain surgeries using my credentials despite never finishing medical school. And now he's faked my death, his death, to collect $50 million in life insurance. The room erupted, people shouting. Ethan standing up, saying, "This man is clearly mentally ill." I have proof, I shouted over the chaos. I have 14 years of documented evidence. I have medical records showing the differences between my surgical outcomes and his. I have photos of him making mistakes the real Alexander Hartwell would never make. I have DNA samples that will prove I'm who I say I am. I turned to Jessica, who was crying, shaking her head in denial. Jessica, I know this is impossible to process, but look at me, really look at me. Underneath the scars and the years on the streets, don't you recognize your husband? She was sobbing. Alex died 14 years ago. I mourned. You mourned me, but I didn't die, and the man you've been living with for 14 years isn't me. He's my brother wearing my face. I pulled out photos from my pocket, pictures I'd managed to take of Ethan with telephoto lenses stolen from a pawn shop, photos showing him eating nuts, photos showing him confused about family details. He has a nut allergy, Ethan said desperately. This proves nothing. I don't have a nut allergy, I corrected. You don't have a nut allergy, but Alexander Hartwell does. Developed it after a reaction to medication when I was 32. You didn't know that because you weren't there. You were living your life while I was living mine. I turned back to the crowd. I can prove every detail of my life up until the day he pushed me off that yacht. I can describe my wedding night, my kids' births, my first surgery, every case I worked on, every technique I developed. Can he? Ethan was backing toward the exit. This is insane. He's a homeless man with delusions. Then let's do a DNA test right now, I challenged. Let's test my DNA against the samples on file from before my death. Let's compare fingerprints. Let's have me perform a medical exam on myself and see if I have the scars and birthmarks that Alexander Hartwell had before he died. Security was moving toward me now. Someone had called the police. But I had one more thing to say. The body in that casket, it's not me. I don't know who it is, probably someone you found who matched my general description and burned beyond recognition. But it's not Alexander Hartwell. I'm Alexander Hartwell, and I'm not dead. I'm right here, and I'm taking my life back. The police arrived. They tried to escort me out, but Jessica stood up. Wait, she said, her voice shaking. Wait, let him prove it. If he's lying, we'll know, but if he's not. She looked at Ethan with an expression of dawning horror. If he's not. That's when Ethan ran. He bolted for the exit, shoving past mourners, his facade of grief completely abandoned. And in that moment of panic, everyone in that room understood. Guilty people run. The police caught him in the parking lot, and when they brought him back inside, when they stood him next to me so everyone could see us together, two men with nearly identical faces, but 14 years of different experiences carved into them, the truth became undeniable. We were twins, we looked alike, but I had scars from living on the streets. He had the smooth hands of a surgeon who'd never really struggled. And when Jessica looked back and forth between us, really looked, I saw the moment she knew. Alex, she whispered, looking at me. Oh my God, Alex. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. It's me, Jess. I came back. I finally came back. She collapsed. Sophia caught her. And the funeral for Alexander Hartwell turned into the trial of Ethan Hartwell, right there in front of 200 witnesses. The aftermath was a legal and media nightmare that's still unraveling. DNA tests confirmed I was Alexander Hartwell. Fingerprints matched. Medical examination showed the scars and birthmarks I'd always had. Everything proved I was who I claimed to be. Ethan was arrested and charged with attempted murder, fraud, identity theft, practicing medicine without a license, insurance fraud, and about 20 other crimes. The body in the casket was never identified. Ethan's lawyers claim it was a cadaver he obtained illegally, though they can't explain how or why without further incriminating him. The trial is ongoing. He's facing life in prison. The medical board revoked Alexander Hartwell's licenses and is reviewing every surgery he performed over 14 years. Families of patients who died are filing wrongful death suits. The hospital is facing massive liability. And me, I'm trying to rebuild a life that was stolen from me. Jessica divorced Ethan immediately. We're talking, trying to figure out if there's anything left of what we had. She thought I was dead. She grieved. And then she built a new life with a man she thought was me. None of that is her fault, but it's hard to get past. My kids are struggling. Sophia and Lucas spent their entire childhoods with a man they thought was their father, learning he was an imposter, that their real father has been homeless, and watching them from afar for 14 years. It's traumatic in ways I don't think any of us will fully process for years. I can't practice surgery anymore. The brain damage, plus 14 years away from medicine, means I'm not qualified. I'm working with lawyers to reclaim my financial assets. Ethan spent some of my money but invested most of it, so there's still quite a bit left. I'm suing Ethan for the 14 years he stole, for the life he took, for the damage he caused to my family, my career, my existence. But no amount of money will give me back those years, won't give me back my kids' childhoods, won't erase the fact that I stood in the rain outside my own house, watching through the window as a man with my face tucked my children into bed and kissed my wife goodnight. I'm 49 years old. I spent 14 of those years erased from my own life. I don't know how to reconcile who I was with who I've become. But I know this, I survived. I came back. I proved I was real when everyone thought I was dead or crazy. And Ethan, the brother who pushed me off a yacht, who stole my face and my life, he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison, looking in the mirror at a face that was never really his. That's not justice, not really, but it's something. This morning I met Sophia for coffee. She's in grad school now. She's 21, studying neuroscience. She wants to understand the brain, maybe to understand what happened to me. We sat in awkward silence for a while. Then she said, I have memories of him teaching me to ride a bike, taking me to my first day of school, helping me with my science homework. Those memories are real to me, but they're not real, they're lies, and I don't know how to process that. They're real, I told her. They happened. The emotions you felt were real. The love you felt was real. It's just directed at the wrong person. Do I have any real memories of you, before he pushed you? You were 7 when I disappeared, so yes, you have memories of the real me. Birthday parties, bedtime stories, trips to the aquarium. Those were me, the real me. She started crying. I can't tell them apart. In my head, it's all just Dad, and I don't know which Dad was real and which was fake. I reached across the table and took her hand. I'm real. I'm right here. And I know I missed 14 years, but I'm not going anywhere now. I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that I'm your real father. What if I don't want you to be? She whispered. What if it's easier to just believe you died 14 years ago and the man who raised me was real? That broke my heart, but I understood. Because that's the real damage Ethan did. He didn't just steal my life. He made it impossible for me to fully reclaim it. Because the people who should have been mine, my wife, my kids, my friends, they spent 14 years building relationships with an imposter. And those relationships were real to them, even if the person wasn't. How do you compete with that? How do you prove you're the real version of someone when the fake version is who they actually know and love? I don't have an answer to that. I'm still figuring it out, one day at a time. One coffee with Sophia, one awkward dinner with Lucas, one painful conversation with Jessica about whether we can ever be married again or if too much has changed. All I know is this: I survived being erased. I survived 14 years of not existing. I survived watching my own life being lived by someone else. And I came back. Maybe that's enough. Maybe just surviving and coming back is the victory, even if the life I return to is broken and strange and nothing like what it was supposed to be. Yesterday, I walked past the hospital where I used to work, where I worked for 14 years while I was actually homeless. A young resident was coming out, wearing scrubs, looking exhausted but satisfied, the way I used to look after a successful surgery. And I realized that's gone. That version of me, that life, that career. Ethan didn't just steal it, he destroyed it. Because even now that everyone knows the truth, I can't go back to being who I was. The brain damage won't let me. The years away from medicine won't let me. The trauma won't let me. He didn't just steal my identity. He murdered who I was and left me to survive as someone else. But I'm still here, still breathing, still fighting. And that's going to have to be enough. Because the alternative, letting him win, letting myself disappear even after coming back, that's not an option. So I'll keep going, keep rebuilding, keep trying to connect with kids who don't quite believe I'm their real father, keep negotiating with a wife who doesn't quite know if she can love me again. Keep living a life that someone tried to steal but couldn't quite kill. That's my revenge, not his prison sentence, not the money I'll get from suing him. Just this: I'm still here, still alive, still myself underneath all the scars and damage. He tried to erase me and replace me. He failed. I'm Alexander Hartwell. And I exist. Clapper board if you made it through this entire story. Clapper board. Like this video right now. If the first 30 seconds hooked you, if your jaw dropped when he revealed himself at the funeral, if you felt every second of those 14 stolen years, smash that like button. Subscribe immediately because stories like this will change how you see the world. Bell. Hit that bell, be here for the next one. Comment "he stole his face" if this story made you question everyone in your life. Share this with someone who needs to understand that the person you trust most might be the most dangerous person in your world. Thank you for being here, for witnessing Alexander's impossible story, for understanding that this isn't just entertainment, it's a warning about what people will do when they want your life more than you want to keep it. Next story drops soon. It's going to destroy you in the best way. Stay aware, stay alive, stay you.